The words sacrifice and Japan tend to conjure images of samurai sitting ready to disembowel themselves in exchange for keeping their honor intact, or to secure the lives of one or many. Countless records exist of self-sacrifice throughout Japanese history, such as the 47 ronin who committed seppuku after avenging their master. But the earliest records of ritual human sacrifice date back to some 600 years before the samurai existed. The term Hitobashira, which translates to human pillar, is typically used to describe the unfortunate people who were buried alive under structures like castles and bridges, a sacrifice to ensure the appeasement of whatever god may cause trouble on any given construction project. Initial instances of this show a strong correlation with water deities and can be found in the Nihongi, or Chronicles of Japan, a book that would have a huge influence on Japanese literature going forward. Published in 720, its contents are an amalgamation of truths, half-truths, myths and fables, not unlike those found in ancient Greek literature, and written hundreds of years after the fact, making it difficult to attest to the veracity of the stories within it. To highlight this issue, one of the subjects of our first story, Emperor Nintoku, is stated within the book to have reigned from 313 to 399, and doing the maths, historians put his age to somewhere around 109 years old, in a period where life expectancy at birth was 20 to 30 years. This is likely due to early writers working backwards from a Chinese theory that dynasty founding years fall on specific cycles, putting the first emperor, Jimmu's reign, at 660 BCE, and consequently this meant stretching the reigns of the emperors that followed in order to fill the gaps. The story itself recounts the overflowing of a river that runs through modern-day Osaka. Such was the supposed rage of the water deity, the workers were unable to finish building the embankments. The solution came in the form of a curiously specific revelation that Emperor Nintoku received in a dream. It told of two men, Kowakubi of Musashi Province and Koromono-ko of Kawachi Province, and that by sacrificing these two men, the water would subside and allow the embankments to be completed. Not much is known about Kowakubi, the first on the proverbial chopping block, who was thrown into the torrent before prayers were made to the deity. The second sacrifice, on the other hand, Koromono-ko, was himself the hereditary administrator for this part of the land, so the responsibility fell to him. When it was his turn, he arrived with two empty gourd flasks and declared that if they sank, he would accept that the deity required another sacrifice, but if they floated, it would be a sign that the deity was false, and thus sacrificing his life would be of little use. His cunning plan worked. The empty gourds floated down the river because, of course, they did, and after a time the water calmed because, of course, it did, allowing the work to continue and Koromono-ko to carry on with his life. A similar story comes from the 12th century in Buzen province, where in order to stop the flood of the Yamakuni River each year, a council of 7 parish governors from one of Japan's most historically significant shrines, Usa Hachiman Shrine, prayed for a week in the hope of receiving a revelation from the gods. Unfortunately, that revelation was human sacrifice, and after failing to find anyone willing to give up their lives, the 7 agreed to each throw their trousers into the river, and the owner of the pair that sank first was sacrificed. It's argued that the reason water deities are so prominent in these stories is due to the expansion of marine trade. a story concerning Taira no Kiyomori, Japan's first samurai ruler of the early 12th century, speaks of sacrifices made to the Sea Dragon King after attempts to build a fortified island off Owada Harbour were dashed in 1173. The passage states, "The construction was smashed to pieces. Kiyomori pondered the matter deeply. He decided that an offering should be made to the Dragon King. Putting a white saddle on a white horse, he mounted a youth upon the horse and cast him into the sea as a human pillar. The Dragon King accepted the offering, for afterwards there were no calamities. Ships now plied their trade without fear, loaded with the country's treasures and cargoes." According to the various legends surrounding this practice, human pillars were often girls or young women, although whether those chosen were willing or not varies from story to story. One tale from Shiga Prefecture speaks of 2 women used as sacrifices during the construction of Nagahama Castle. The first, the most beautiful woman in the castle, named Okane, was buried alive, and the moat was subsequently named after her. The second was Okiku, a fisherman's daughter who volunteered herself to be sacrificed in place of her blind younger sister. Interestingly, both of these victims have physical memorials at the castle, a stone monument to Okane and an Inari shrine built to pacify Okiku's spirit. These kinds of stories exist all across the country, and one characteristic that's shared among many of them is that the victims belonged to the local Bon-Odori groups, traditional dancers who performed during the Obon festival. One such legend is that of the Maiden of Matsue. In 1607, Daimyo Horio Yoshiharu began constructing Matsue Castle in modern-day Shimane Prefecture. A snippet of information here comes from the Irish-Greek writer Lafcadio Hearn, who spent the latter part of his life in Japan translating folklore for Western audiences. In his book, Glimpses of Unfamiliar Japan from 1894, he writes, "A maiden of Matsue was interred alive under the walls of the castle as a sacrifice to some forgotten gods. Her name has never been recorded. Nothing concerning her is remembered except that she was beautiful and very fond of dancing." It is said that she was the best and most beautiful dancer in the town, and after her sacrifice, certain areas of Matsue forbade the Bon-Odori, for when the dance was performed, the maiden's cries could be heard from the castle tower, and the ground shook violently. Staying in Shimane, another story tells of a girl in a kimono adorning the crest of the moon who was taken from her Bon-Odori group and used as the human pillar for Gasantoda Castle. According to folklore, during the burial ceremony, drums were played, and these drums can still be heard emanating from the mountains each year. Not all human pillars were beautiful young women, though. Maruoka Castle in Fukui Prefecture has its own legend of a one-eyed peasant woman named Oshizu. With a young and hungry mouth to feed, she volunteered to be sacrificed when the castle's troubled construction demanded it. Her one condition was that the lord of the castle, Shibata Katsutoyo, made her son a samurai, which would alleviate greatly his financial woes. Shibata agreed, and Oshizu was buried alive within the foundations. The story takes an unfortunate turn, however, as Shibata was called away on business and the son was never made a samurai. Each year thereafter, the castle's moat would overflow in spring. People called it the Tears of Oshizu, and her spirit wouldn't be soothed until a small tomb was built in her honor. The memorials that exist at these sites are numerous, a few more examples being Oyoshi, buried under Gujo Hachiman Castle in Gifu, who has a shrine and festival dance dedicated to her. Otome, the daughter of a magistrate in Fukushima, has a cherry blossom tree planted at Shirakawa Komine Castle. And Ohiji, who was chosen by a lottery to be buried at Ozu Castle in Ehime, had the Hiji River named after her. It's believed that these monuments and memorials served as moral stories that encouraged the idea that someone should bear the cost of making everyone else's lives easier. And while they were often framed around the placation of gods, the underlying idea became ingrained within societal expectations. But despite these monuments, there's only one case where actual evidence of a sacrificial human pillar exists outside of local legend. And what adds to the curiosity is that there's no known record of it, so the story has been pieced together after the fact. Hiji Castle in Oita began construction in 1601, with its new lord, Nobutoshi Kinoshita, settling the land overlooking Beppu Bay. Fast forward some 360 years to when repairs took place in the 1960s, and a wooden coffin was discovered containing the remains of what is believed to have been an elderly samurai. The tragedy of this is that the remains were disposed of and no official record was made. More recently, however, local museum director Hirai Yoshito came across the work of a high school history club who documented their own findings from the site at the time of its discovery, which have led him to surmise that the remains were likely to have been a human pillar. It's theorized that it was in connection to the Demon Gate, or more precisely the Reverse Demon Gate. It was common for large structures to have a protective tower or gate that couldn't be opened facing the northeast, the direction from where demons would try to enter. The second most dangerous direction was the opposite, facing the southwest. And it's here that researchers believe the foundations beneath the structure were weak, leading to a troubled construction and the need for a human sacrifice. Of the old samurai, the students' research spoke of a rusted kabuto samurai helmet which rested above the coffin, while inside, the samurai's grey hair was still tied in a top knot before disintegrating from exposure to the air. And with him was a small ceramic statue of an elderly samurai. Director Hirai believes that it was the method of this burial that lends to the idea that the sacrifice was still alive. The samurai was found sitting upright in a seated or kneeling position, entombed within a wooden barrel. But while this was normal for lower-ranking samurai and commoners alike, the barrel in this instance was inverted when placed, suggesting the sacrifice was still alive. The term Hitobashira survived into the 20th century, although its meaning changed from ritual human sacrifice to something much darker. The Jōmon Tunnel in Hokkaido was completed in October 1914. Its construction carried out with the use of dozens, if not hundreds, of prisoners or indentured labourers recruited under deceptive circumstances, essentially slave labour. It's said that these workers were subject to horrendous conditions, with many dying from overwork and malnutrition, and some of those who were unable to continue were beaten to death. For decades, local myths spoke of countless bodies being buried within the tunnel's walls, and in 1970, during renovations to repair a crack caused by an earthquake 2 years prior, a discovery pointed towards these legends being true. Uncovered within its walls was a body in an upright position, but not as a sacrifice to a god, but the victim of horrific abuse. Although the facts may never be truly uncovered, they're likely not far off the story that the worker was beaten with a shovel, with his burial in the rock serving as a warning to others. And to make what is a grim end to this topic even more grim, this wasn't even the first body found at the site. Locals would often come across hand and foot bones while collecting wild vegetables, and excavated behind a Jizo statue carved in 1959, less than a mile from the tunnel, the remains of up to 50 bodies were uncovered. The Jōmon Tunnel incident aside, the purpose of each of these sacrifices still rumbles under the surface of Japanese society, the sacrificial burden that's expected to be shouldered by the individual, which makes human pillars a disturbing metaphor today as compensation cases related to overwork continue to hit record numbers. But at least people aren't being buried under castles anymore.